Lamine Zarrad is the founder and CEO of StellarFi, a credit builder that reports unlimited bill payments to three major credit bureaus. With over a decade of experience in financial services, Lamine has worked with companies such as Merrill Lynch and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency before founding FinTech's Token and Joust. At StellarFi, Lamine is leading a mission to disrupt the U.S. poverty cycle and provide credit access to millions of Americans with low or no credit. Born in Azerbaijan, Lamine came to the United States as a refugee and served in the Marine Corps. He resides in Austin, Texas with his family. Let us welcome Lamine Zarrad. Welcome, Lamine.
Thank you so much, Dalton. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. It's good to have you. So why don't you first share with us, how is it that you became a refugee? It seems like it was almost a technicality, if I remember correctly.
I suppose you can call that. So I was born in Azerbaijan, as you pointed out, in the capital of Baku. And my family had a unique ethnic composition. My mother was half Azerbaijani, half Armenian, which proved to be a very toxic ethnic combination of the time. In 1989, as Soviet Union started to crumble, a lot of the, I would say, old ethnic tensions started to rise to the top. And some of you may recall from recent news, there's a dispute over a territory in Azerbaijan called Nagorno-Karabakh. And I won't get into the details of that dispute, but it was a dispute between ethnic Armenians and ethnic Azeris. And as a result, unfortunately, there was an ethnic cleansing event that occurred. And if you had any Armenian background at all, and I was only a quarter Armenian, you still targeted. And so we were forced to flee Baku at the end of December of 1989 to Moscow, which at the time was still a capital of former USSR, and spent 6 years as refugees in Moscow, and then found our way to US. 7 countries across Europe on the train and to Netherlands, and then flew to Georgia, where we immigrated.
Wow. And that was 1989, correct? So you were 16 years old, 17 years old?
So in 1989, I was 10. By the time I came to US, I was 16.
I got you. Okay, that's it. And not long after that, you joined the U.S. Marines. Is that correct?
That's right. 2 years after immigrating to US, I joined Marine Corps. I enlisted, spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, and now it was an amazing experience for me. It was transformational in every way possible. Well, culturally, I was able to integrate, also, kind of wrap my mind around how, the country works, so to speak, right? That there are so many different roles. How does finance work, for example? I had to learn things by borrowing money, and this is why I do what I do today. Made a lot of mistakes along the way, but also, gained access to resources as a veteran that helped me get through college, through grad school, and eventually, through the rest of my career.
You have quite the impressive academic resume. Why don't you share with our participants some of the universities and colleges you've attended and what you've accomplished there?
I think publicly, I'm sharing a small fraction of schools. I don't know if it's impressive. It's certainly eclectic. I was always very intellectually curious about different topics and studied everything from geology to business and finance, public policy, to organizational behavior and psychology. And I studied across several universities, publicly share information on schools that I was seriously involved with and acquired degrees from, which include University of Texas, Harvard University. But along that journey while in the Marine Corps, I took classes where I could, community colleges and so forth.
Fantastic. And are you currently studying at the moment? It seems like you're a lifelong learner. So I would assume you're involved in some study at the moment.
I'm always studying. Not an official capacity. I'm not enrolled in any academic institution, but I'm always reading books, trying to figure things out. I mean, I feel like we, as people, as humans, kind of groping in the dark, right? And any new ideas, any revelation someone else had before, are very helpful along this journey.
Okay. So I believe at the time you were thinking of your first financial technology startup, you were working as an OCC examiner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what was it about your experience as a refugee, a Marine, and a bank examiner doing to help you come up with this idea and where it might go?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with refugee experience. I think it's very important. I think what makes refugees unique is that we sort of forced into kind of hard decision making and survival mode by the circumstances. And you know, folks who do make it, and unfortunately there are many very sad stories out there, but folks who do make it because of creativity, ingenuity, and resilience. And these are the traits, you know, not to sound cliche, but these are the traits that make you successful in business. Business, in many ways, resembles the sort of uncertainty of being a refugee. You make some decisions that are inherently risky because you're trying to capture the upside of what business has to offer. You make those decisions based on incomplete, imperfect information. You usually dive headfirst into something new that you're not really fluent in or have any understanding of how this thing works. And you kind of have to figure this out. And so you know, concretely, I can give you a few examples from my refugee days that helped me, you know, become an entrepreneur.
Please
When we're
do.
in Moscow, yeah, of course. When we were in Moscow, we had no resources. You know, my parents didn't have a job. I was still very young, and so we came up with, you know, an idea to make some side hustle income, as it's called today. And I was selling bootlegged VHS tapes in the 90s in the Moscow in the streets of Moscow to you know, to supplement our family's income and learn a lot about, you know, being a salesperson and actually having, you know, a value proposition that resonated with folks and developing trust and level of comfort. And that, you know, that experience lasted a lifetime for me. This is an experience that is incredibly rare these days for whatever reason, or rather skill that's rare, an experience that that certainly like validates that skill. Uh, then, you know, fast forward to my professional career, you know, Marine Corps was a place where I really sort of learned how to be disciplined. You know, despite all the hardships that I've experienced, I've sort of like, you know, floated around and I was very flexible and had to deal with circumstances ad hoc. I didn't have very clear vision and ability to execute on that vision
Mhm.
before joining the Marines. And Marine Corps really instilled that kind of operational framework in my mind where I knew what needed to be done and then, you know, examine my resources and circumstances and then use, you know, those bits and pieces to craft a path forward. And frankly, I don't think I would have gotten that kind of you know, experience anywhere else. And then, you know, as a bank examiner, those two experiences are important, but they're kind of abstract. As a bank examiner, I learned specific skills and understanding of the banking sector, where, you know, I had a really interesting vantage point. When you are a bank regulator, you see banks top down and bottom up.
Mhm.
It's an experience that's impossible to replicate as an employee of a bank because you're sort of you know, pigeonholed into something inside of the bank, and that's all you see. That's your world. As a bank regulator, you see the whole thing, and you understand how it works as a business. You understand how it interacts with other financial institutions and other businesses, and then you start sort of seeing the kinks in a system. You're seeing the misalignments and all the things that do not work well, and that's my mind always works in that way anyway. And when I was an examiner, I realized this. My God, this is such an important um, institution for our country. It creates stability, security. But man, there's so many things that are wrong with it and so broken in such deep ways. And I focused on things that I thought I could fix using, you know, technology. You know, sometimes naively, but that's what entrepreneurship is all about, right? You fixate on the problem and you're trying to solve that problem. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, very well, very well. But as you transitioned to a solution, you were looking more at the consumer side or the potential consumer side. So why don't you tell us a little more about Token and Joust?
Yeah, of course. So I consumers are always like top of mind for me, but I actually started with small businesses. I was thinking about entrepreneurs specifically. Both Token and Joust, you know, address the entrepreneurial problem. Uh, I believe entrepreneurship is the best vehicle for social mobility. It doesn't matter what your background is. I think if you can execute an idea that you have in this country, there are enough resources that, you know, you can move into entirely new social strata. You know, and then this is no secret, right? It is very much the sort of the underpinnings of the American dream. And when I see that, you know, there, whether through policy, politics, or just, you know, structural limitations, when entrepreneurship is inhibited in certain industries and sectors, it bothers me because I feel that, you know, it's unfair. It's a violation of, I think, the most basic human right. in this country that allows you, to sort of like succeed in that way. And with Token and Joust, I identified that there were businesses that couldn't access banking in the way they needed to access banking. And by the way, two different companies, two different problems. I'll start with Token because it's exciting and quite controversial probably for some folks. So putting aside all of your preconceived notions about this industry, this is a new budding cannabis industry in Colorado, California, Oregon, 9 states at the time. And when I was a bank examiner, we had banks that were supposed to serve their communities, and those communities had cannabis dispensaries, but they couldn't do it. And so they came to us, and U.S. Treasury has a sort of an obligation to help their banks figure this out. And we said, all right, fine. Look, you can, if it's legal in your state, if there's no interstate commerce, you can offer those services so you can take the cash off the street and create more accountability. But one thing they couldn't do is surveillance and oversight. They had to have very sophisticated surveillance tools, and that's what we built. We built those tools to help banks oversee transactions to make sure that those transactions are done in a lawful way. And that company was called Token. We actually used blockchain back in the day to create an indelible ledger, so the banks knew that once transaction happened, it couldn't be modified in any way, shape, or form. There was no tax evasion, there was no money laundering, and so forth. And that company evolved into much more than just kind of a surveillance tool, onboarding tool. It became truly a banking platform for banks to deal with dispensaries. So that's how we addressed that issue. Similarly, my second company, Joust, was focused on inefficiencies in banking, but related to freelancers. Most of you know that gig work is huge, right? The gig work is kind of overtaking traditional W-2 employment because people have the freedom to make money whatever they want through different platforms. But when you're a freelancer and you have inconsistent streams of income, it's very difficult to get loans, very difficult to get any kind of financial underwriting. Banks don't get you. They don't understand what you are. They think you're risky. And so we thought we can do it better than banks, and we did, right? We pulled data from different sources, cobbled together these profiles for freelancers, and therefore we're able to give them access to credit, loans and things like that, banking, payments. And once again, all of that is very much tied to my personal experiences and struggles as an entrepreneur and struggles as an immigrant and a refugee.
Did you build both of these companies in Austin?
No, actually, the first two were built in Denver, Colorado, where I resided at the time. And then we moved our second company, Joust, to Austin to support its growth. Austin is a budding tech city. There's lots of talent here. Texas has very favorable business laws that frankly just make it easier to operate a business here than Colorado and other states.
Yeah, we understand that Austin is kind of the Silicon Valley of Texas and maybe the entire South. What kind of scaffolding do you have around you from that community that helps you to think in ways where okay, I'll start another enterprise. I can be more successful here. What is it about Austin that makes it so special?
Yeah, Austin is incredibly special for a couple of reasons. For the same reasons actually that makes Silicon Valley special. You can't just make an ecosystem, by willing it into place, right? You say poof out of the thin air, and now you have an ecosystem. Miami tried to do this. You can't just like make some laws changes to say taxation or something like that and attract a bunch of businesses. It has to happen gradually over time. Austin made massive public investments into tech back in the 80s. And as a result, had some successes, Texas Instruments, then Dell in the 90s, and many others. And so you have, in Austin, you have an ecosystem that has 3 layers. You have these old massive sort of behemoths that, that are international companies that do really well. This is where a lot of your executive talent sort of resides, a lot of know-how and brain trust. Then you have a second layer of a more recent sort of success stories, companies like Vrbo, if you guys ever like travel and book your accommodations, HomeAway, which was acquired by Vrbo, other companies that are younger, say like Apple and so forth. Oracle has its headquarters here. Then these are massive companies, but they're sort of like younger, more forward-looking, vanguard of like the former startups, if you will. And then you have a budding startup ecosystem on top of that, but companies like us, right? Like entrepreneurs with small companies trying to make it in life. And so when you have those 3 layers, you have a holistic ecosystem where you can then grow a company by tapping into senior management resources from other companies. You can attract other talent from other cities because they know that if it doesn't work out with you, they can get another job without having to uproot their family, move somewhere else. It creates a really interesting context for for decision making for employees. And frankly, there's a lot of investment in brand too. If you read anything about Austin, Austin does a pretty good job, signaling why it's a great city to live in. And that's very important when cities are sort of aware of that dynamic. Yeah, it's a fantastic city. Unlike, say, Silicon Valley, it is not oppressive when it comes to California and tax laws, for example. But Austin does a great job, reinvesting a lot of the taxes back into the community. So it's a nicely balanced approach here. Unlike, say, Seattle, when we looked at Seattle, it's not incredibly expensive, although Austin is more expensive than other cities in this nation. But once again, it's just a balance, kind of like a Goldilocks ratio for us, where it's a good city to build a company, but also raise a family and live, right? Because ultimately you have to live somewhere when you're building a business.
We'll get these comments to the Chamber of Commerce. I'm sure they'd like to share them. So let's talk about StellarFi. What led to this company, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, so when my last company was acquired, I became a head of product at the acquired company, and we offered a company called Zen Business that offered entrepreneurs a way to really take an idea and form it into a business, and then get all the tools you need to run your business. One of the things we try to do is give them access to capital. So if you're an entrepreneur, let's say you are a caterer or an aspiring caterer, you need some resources to go buy some ingredients so you can make your first meal and go sell it. That's the biggest hurdle for most people, and we couldn't figure out how to do it. We tried different partnerships, and ultimately what we realize is that it's not about the business, it's about an individual and their personal credit score that gives them that very first step into business. And it's probably important to folks listening. Just remember, you have to have a very good credit score. You have to have your finances in order to make the leap into business. And I got obsessed with the concept because I knew that pain point, acutely. And so I brought in a partnership with Experian. We got access to all of their data that Experian has, and I realized that problem is massive. It's not just entrepreneurs, it's not immigrants, it's not marginalized groups. It's 2/3 of the adult population, including high income earners, including your just average Americans. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck, even if you make a lot of money. And the problem is not lack of capital or lack of resources. The problem is mismanagement of those resources. Most of us are very irresponsible with our bills. Yeah, sometimes for various reasons. Sometimes because we forget, because there's just so many of them. Sometimes because the way we get paid. And so we said, all right, what we need to do is build a company that helps people pay their bills on time. So address the problem at its core, not treat some symptom like, hey, let's figure out a way to boost the credit score. No, let's actually help people pay their bills. And if they pay their bills on time, the credit scores will follow, and follow really fast, because on-time payment history is the most important factor that contributes to your score in both FICO and the other model called Vantage Score model. And so that's what we build. We build a bill pay solution that allows consumers to sign up, download the app, sign up, link their bank account, and then link the bills that they want to pay through us, ideally all of their bills, and you can pay virtually any bill. And then we pay them on your behalf, and you pay us back. We create a sort of a convenient experience for the consumer, and as a result, build their credit. But that's just one feature, right? Credit building is one thing. We want to give you rewards for, reward you for positive on-time payment behavior, and then of course connect you to things you want. If no one wants to be better at finances just to be better at finances. We all want things. So we want to buy a house. We want to buy a car. We want to get credit cards. We want to lower our insurance rates. And a good score and a positive payment history helps you get all that, and we want to connect you with those things. So that's what we do. That's our big vision, and we very much on our way to that big vision after 2 years in the market.
No, congratulations, a worthy endeavor. Do you have any success stories that you might share?
Sure, related to just business operations, or
Well, maybe to StellarFi, to what you're doing with StellarFi and how it's helped
oh yeah,
with their credit
of
access
course,
and
of course.
rating.
Yeah, I mean, we have customers that email us and ping us all the time on like, hey, I just signed up for StellarFi 3 months ago. I had no idea that, my score could be improved by a few hundred points, and just got 100, 200, 300 points in just a few months. And we're able to qualify for a loan, able to qualify for a mortgage. We had folks, send us an email and kind of explain that their mortgage lender said that the only reason they got over the hump of qualifying is because of the StellarFi trade line on their profile. It's things like that we hear all the time. Trying to think of some interesting ones. There's a really interesting one. We have a user, and this, by the way, happens very frequently, more frequently than people think, who, as a child, had her mother had the same name as her, use her credit identity to go borrow money. And, we trying to be empathetic about these things. Her mother needed the money, but she was very careless with her daughter's identity and basically stole her identity to borrow a bunch of loans, max out credit cards, and then never paid them back. And so this young woman, when she reached adulthood, learned that she has a credit score, and it's the worst score you can possibly get, and her credit profile is damaged. And it affected her entire life, her career trajectory, what she could do and what she couldn't do. And by the time she got, to use StellarFi, she was like, her background when it comes to credit, that was in complete shambles. Within 6 months, she was able to recover and then qualify for a mortgage and go buy a house with her 2 children and a husband. And it changed her life. It quite literally changed her life. And you think it's trivial, you think it's, a small thing in someone's, life and existence, but man, it is so important. It can change everything. It can be a difference between you getting a job and not getting a job, because employers do run background checks, and credit scores is one of those things they look at. It could be a difference between being able to drive to said job and, have a car and not have a car. Of course, live somewhere, property management, landlords look at it. So anyway, we have those stories. We have many stories. That's probably one of the more sort of moving stories for me personally.
I understand. And we have a question here in the chat box. Can you share with us the impact you hope to make by disrupting the U.S. poverty cycle and providing credit to access to millions of Americans with low to no credit?
Yeah. So we believe that credit scoring system is outdated. Like I don't want to use any other term. It's just outdated. It was well-intentioned, back in the 80s, but it just doesn't work for most Americans. As a result, it keeps most Americans in that constant cycle, right, of being behind on their bills, and it's a downward spiral that keeps folks down. It's like a pressure, a pressure chamber. And so by disrupting it, we kind of remove it. And what I mean by that concretely, what is just that rescoring people and saying, lenders thought you were bad, but you're actually not bad. You can manage this debt really well with the help of these tools. And now you can access things. And imagine if we can do this at scale. Think of it this way. American economy is one of the few economies in the world, and certainly the first one to do this, to ground itself in consumer credit. Meaning that your ability to borrow money is way more important than your savings in this country. And this is evident through the fact that we have monetary policy, right? We have Federal Reserve that controls interest rates. Why do they control interest rates? Because they want to control the ability of people borrowing money and spending that money. It is the engine for our economy. And if 2/3 of that engine is impaired, it's broken, it's not inefficient, it affects the entire economy at output, GDP, so forth. And imagine, it doesn't have to take a whole lot of imagination here, but tweaking that thing where it's 10% more efficient now, it makes the country better. It makes everyone sort of better off, and everyone benefits across all social strata. And that's kind of how we see, our mission and our contribution to this nation.
Lamine, you are inspiring and encouraging to all of us. I look forward to the fact that you're going to be back with us on Friday with a panel of experts to talk about what refugee entrepreneurs need now, especially after your statement that entrepreneurship is the best method for social mobility, a statement I happen to agree with well. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Dalton. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.